I'm Joel Chasnoff, host of FIDF Live. I'm coming to you from the Kiryat, IDF headquarters in central Tel Aviv. Israel and America are unwavering allies. Why? Because of shared values and common interests. But what does this partnership actually look like on the ground? How do these two countries actually work together to protect their citizens and the freedoms and democracy we both hold so dear? On today's episode of FIDF Live, we will talk to leaders on both sides about the mutual threats, the critical opportunities, and the life-saving partnerships made possible by our critical alliance. This week, we saw the American-Israeli partnership in action when an IDF delegation was sent to Miami to assist in the recovery efforts after the tragedy that unfolded there. Let's learn more. We are talking with Colonel Elad Edrei. He is the deputy commander for the Israeli search and rescue team on the ground in Surfside, Miami. So, Kodem Kol, before anything else, thank you so much, Colonel Edrei, for joining us here on FIDF Live.
Good morning, everyone from Southside Miami. I'm glad to be with you.
I want to ask you about the expertise on the ground, the people you are working with. Can you just tell me who they are and what the situation is like?
We work here with a few local units, including Task Force 1 and Task Force 2 from Florida, the state of Florida, and also from Miami. I can say in pretty much confidence that this is the most complex site I ever seen in my professional life. The unique of the collapse is that usually on earthquakes and similar disasters, the buildings tend to turn to its size. And here, the building collapsed into itself.
It sounds like, obviously, logistically, it's extremely complicated. But I want to ask about the emotional side as well. I mean, you are all human beings. What is it like emotionally?
We landed here on 5:30 a.m. And we decided on the plane that we don't want to go to the hotel, we don't want to eat, we don't want to rest, we only want to get to the site. So we changed to IDF uniform on the airport. And from there, we split it to two teams. Colonel Golan, the commander of the delegation, is the first team. They went to the site, they went to measure it, to understand what exactly is being needed there with the engineers and the rescuers. And me, with another two experts for population behavior, we went to the family center. And together you face 500 people, family members, relatives, friends, neighbors that are looking for answers, looking for comfort, looking for details. And during that debrief, which takes an hour and a half, We used to give them the details also from the Israeli delegation representative, which is me.
Have they ever approached you personally and said anything about the fact that Israel is here participating?
A lot of people come to the delegation members when we walk on the street, when we get down from the pile, from the site. They come to us. They hug us. They thank us. They say how important our presence is, and how it helps them to feel safe, to feel that they're not alone.
I want to ask one final question, and that's about the location you're in. What is it like working in the United States? Is it different from other missions? When you're actually in the U.S., which is such a strong ally with Israel.
It's very different because we feel that we are at home. We feel that we are very, very, let's say, in our natural environment. Another thing that is very unique here is the Jewish community. The Jewish community here in Miami is very, very warm, and all the time people come to the delegation members and they ask us what do we need and what do we want them to help us, even with small actions like laundry and come give me to take you from the hotel to the site, or whatever we need. And as for the big picture, of course, we understand that this is a unique situation because Israel always get help from the United States in hundreds of complicated situations, military, politically, and so on. And now we are more than happy, and it feels like we are really, really with family.
Well, it is family, and it's emotional for us and heartwarming to hear that. I'm with Major Bentzi Zimmerman. He's the head of the U.S. Cooperation Desk at the International Cooperation Division of the IDF. And I want to start out by asking about threats. What are the major threats that Israel faces right now?
The challenges are growing, whether it's regular warfare and conventional warfare with missile attacks and stuff that we're used to seeing in the world, but also new capabilities, advanced technology that's cheap and is coming into the region. We're seeing unmanned air vehicles, cyber attacks. All of this creates a 360-degree threat to the state of Israel. And thank God we have a strong IDF, we have a strong military and other security organizations in the state of Israel, along with regional and global partners that enable us to counter these threats and preserve the security and safety of the people of Israel, but also the stability in the region.
So what I'm hearing is that even though we in Israel consider it quiet right now, the IDF is thinking down the road to the threats of tomorrow, 10 years from now. You guys are not at rest.
We can't just look at yesterday's war. We have to look at the war in 10 years from now, in 20 years from now. We have a multi-year plan, TNUFA, that is being worked on in the IDF, looking at innovating our capabilities, moving them forward to the future, countering these emerging threats. And we have a lot of work that's being done alone here in the IDF. But as I said earlier, regional partners and global partners are a major factor in this, enabling us to leverage capabilities, leverage opportunities to counter all these threats.
I want to talk about the partnerships. I know you are the director of U.S. partnerships at the International Partnerships Division. So in what way does the cooperation with the U.S. military strengthen the security of Israel?
The fact that we have such an enduring partnership with the United States Armed Forces, the fact that our countries are so embedded within each other with shared values and shared interests, allow us to work together in order to counter all these threats, allow us to have a common understanding of these threats, understand the capabilities needed, and ensure the qualitative edge that Israel has in the region, but also preserving the stability in the region and ensuring the stability and safety of both of our countries' interests in the Middle East.
You mentioned cooperation. How does cooperation with the United States military actually strengthen Israel's security?
Number one, deterrence. Number two, the relationship opens doors for regional partnerships and new opportunities in the Middle East. Number three, with the US in our corner, we could develop our capabilities for a stronger IDF.
Last question. Aside from protecting itself, what is Israel's role in the Middle East?
Israel is on the front line of the global war of terrorism. The challenges and the threats that the IDF face on a daily basis are the challenges and threats that the entire world are going to face, if not tomorrow, then the day after. So a stronger Israel means a stable Middle East. That means a stable and more secure world.
Major Bensi Zimmerman, thank you so much for joining us on FIDF Live. The special alliance between Israel and America goes both ways. Both countries contribute, and both countries certainly benefit. I'm meeting now with Dr. Michael Makovsky. He's the president and CEO of JINSA, the Jewish Institute for the National Security of America. And we're going to talk about the very special relationship between the United States and Israel. So first of all, Dr. Makovsky, thank you so much for joining us on FIDF Live.
Thank you for having me.
I want to begin by asking about ROI, return on investment. What is America's return on investment from this relationship that we have between our countries? How does the U.S. benefit?
Alexander Haig once said, former Secretary of State, Israel's like an aircraft carrier. But it's even more than that than it was when Haig said that in the 1980s. Because as you see, the region has been posing more threats for the United States. Israel is the only country on the ground that has been pushing back against the Iranians and their influence everywhere. No other ally of the United States is really doing that effectively. And as the United States, as of today, is seen as more retrenching from the region, their reliance on Israel, I think, grows even more. And that includes not just on what the IDF does on the ground in Syria or in Gaza or in Sinai, or in helping other American allies in Jordan and in Egypt and in the Gulf countries, but also in intelligence.
A lot of what we're talking about is really a case of shared values. Can you speak a bit about the shared values that our two countries have?
America has been founded by, I'd say, the Judeo-Christian values, and those are very important, and even more so now when you see, I'd say, growing extremism in a lot of part of the world and authoritarianism, that those shared values between the United States and Israel really stand out, I think.
You're here in Israel right now with a JINSA delegation. Tell me, who are you with, what are you doing, and how is the delegation going so far?
We had a group of very prominent retired generals and admirals, including the previous chairman of the Joint Chiefs, previous head NSA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and others, CENTCOM. And now we also have a delegation of active duty military officers, elite officers from the different services who are on the trajectory of becoming generals and admirals. Now, both delegations learned a great deal. They loved their time here. We had, with the active duty officers, they wore their uniforms one day and in Herzliya in the marina, and just spontaneously they told, Israelis just cheered them. I think such real spontaneous actions just speaks to the bond between these two countries almost more than anything else.
I know at certain points various military personnel from the U.S. train with IDF soldiers and officers. What is that experience like for them?
The soldiers love the interaction with each other, so they get a real appreciation of what they're facing, and they really identify a lot with what the Israelis are facing here.
Last question. What is your vision for the future of this very special relationship between Israel and the United States?
I think these two countries are going to remain bound together, very bound together now. They're both seen on the same side on most issues. There's a great shared values, and there's a lot of mutual security interests that I think will keep these countries together for a long time. But there's a lot of work to do to make sure that that happens. And I do think in the longer term, as the previous Israeli ambassador to Washington used to say many times, I think Israel will become, or is, if not, will become the most important ally for the United States in the 21st century.
Well, President and CEO of JINSA, Dr. Michael Makovsky, thank you so much for joining us on FIDF Live.
Thank you for having me.
And now we're going to meet officers from both sides of our alliance, an air attaché from Israel and one from the United States. I am with the Israel Air Force Attaché to Washington, Brigadier General Amir Karen, and the United States Air Force Attaché to Israel, Colonel Marty DeStasio. So first of all, thank you both for making some time to be with us on FIDF Live.
Thank you for having us, Joel.
Thanks, Joel.
I want to begin talking about the partnership between our two countries. The IDF Chief of Staff, Aviv Kochavi, had his first official visit to the United States, where he met with senior military leaders from the U.S. military. Why is this cooperation between the IDF and the U.S. Armed Forces so important? And I want to pose this question to you, Colonel DeStasio, first.
Thanks, Joel. And again, thank you for having me, and hello, and good to see my very good friend, Brigadier General Karen. Amir, good to see you. And first of all, we're very glad that General Kochavi was able to visit last week. It was a really great visit. And I think it's really important doing something together, become stronger together.
Brigadier General Karen, would you like to add anything on that idea of partnership and cooperation, why it's so important?
Yeah, I think it starts from the highest level. The best and strongest ally of Israel is the United States of America. So we see ourselves, the IDF, as valuable allies and friends of the United States. We believe we share the same values, the same interests, and often see eye to eye with the United States in a lot of important issues.
You know, a lot of people might not realize that the actual sides, the US and the IDF, actually train together. It's not just a partnership and idea, but they're actually training exercises between the two nations regularly.
Yeah, so as you said, Joel, our most long-lasting and enduring exercise is the Juniper Cobra, which was initiated in the first time back in 2001, and it is conducted every 2 years. We exercise together a scenario that is quite like we experienced in the first and second Gulf War.
We work so well together, and our interoperability becoming so close that two squadrons are able to simply call each other on the telephone anymore, or maybe a text or an email, and set up an exercise in maybe a matter of hours or days. We share a lot of common values, and I was very excited to hear President Rivlin. I know he leaves soon, and I want to congratulate him on a wonderful tenure, but I heard him mention in the White House this week about our shared values, and we really do believe that. So when we're able to come together, it really is much easier than you might imagine.
Well, I wanted to ask you, Colonel DeStasio, how does this cooperation actually strengthen both forces?
Well, I really do believe that when you do something together, you do become stronger. And one of the reasons we do that, first of all, when you're able to train and exercise together, that creates its own deterrent against those who might wish you ill. They see the strength among partners, and that's very important. I talk about building trust and confidence, which is another a very important aspect.
You know, one question that's come up is shared values. And unfortunately, we do see an example of it playing out right now in Miami. It's a very sad tragedy that's happened there. An Israeli delegation, however, has been sent over. And I want to ask you, Brigadier General Karen, what does this mean to you just on a personal level or military to see an Israeli delegation over in Miami?
I think it's a very, very strong evidence for the great cooperation between the two nations, between Israel and the United States. And we need to support each other in any situation. And this is a great example of a situation that the United States can get some support from Israel.
I think there's very close cooperation, so it was a very natural fit for them to come over and be there. It's a very tragic incident, and so I just want to say on behalf of the U.S., thank you very much.
Well, as we say in Hebrew, rak bismachot, only in happy times that we should work together and come together. I want to thank you both, Brigadier General Amir Karen and Colonel Marty DeStasio, for giving us some time here on FIDF Live. We truly appreciate your being with us.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
In the old days, wars were fought only on air, on land, and at sea. But now Israel has a new threat: technology. In a moment, we're going to go inside the headquarters of Israel's cyber defense system and meet a senior officer. His work is highly confidential and top secret, which is why his face will be dark through the entire interview. Let's learn more. I'm meeting right now with Lieutenant Colonel O. He's a senior officer in Israel's cyber domain. One of his main jobs is to maintain cooperation with Israel's allies, including the United States, in the areas of cyber defense and cyber warfare. For those of us who don't fully understand what it is, it's complicated. What is the cyber domain, and how does it impact how Israel currently fights its wars?
Cyber domain currently is the man-made environment from a military perspective, create a new battlefield. I would say that we haven't seen in the past, or this is the modern battlefield that we are facing today. It create the ability, or gave countries the ability, state and non-state actors, to create an impact on our daily life without leaving any trace.
And I know that you personally have worked with American forces. I want to hear more about that cooperation. First of all, why is it so important? And second of all, how does it actually logistically happen when we are 7,000 miles away?
Well, this is interesting yet sensitive.
Don't reveal any secrents.
Yeah, it's a sensitive topic, because usually in the cyber domain we're doing everything we can. We are maintaining a strong strategic relationship between us and variety of defense organization within the U.S. Usually those kind of events can be presented as by sharing relevant information at the same time, and even if needed, operating together against adversaries and enemies.
Can you give us an example of an event or a threat that was thwarted because of this cooperation?
Without sharing any sensitive information or secret, I would say that the last few years, and it's not a secret that Israel is facing the proliferation of the Iranian activities in the region. It's same that we are seeing them trying to put their effort at the physical domain surrounding Israel. We are seeing the Iranian cyber forces doing variety of means against Israel. I think one of the latest events that was published a few months ago was the attempt of the Iranian forces to attack Israel water companies in that matter. And although it's a civil event, the National Cyber Directorate is leading those kind of efforts. Of course, IDF is always involved when we're talking about the Iranian activity against Israel.
We still obviously have the ground forces, the Air Force, the Navy, and they play an important role. How does your work in the cyber world impact what those ground forces, air forces, water forces do?
I think in the modern age, the audience should understand that modern battlefield is being based and operated by technology. Look at the F-35, look at submarine. And if it's a computer, it means that it's connected wireless this way or another. So our assignment is to make sure that the process from the supply chain, the phrase that we are defining, to prevent cyber activity prior to the capability being operated by the IDF, or even after, we need to make sure by a variety of means, from penetration tests and other sensitive testing, to make sure that, first of all, that the system, that the network, the computer won't be hacked from external capability. Our main mission as a cyber defense organization to be one step ahead from our enemies and adversary, and therefore understand what are their wills, what are their capability, and put it in front of us with understanding where we're going to put our effort regarding defending our assets and our capability.
Lieutenant Colonel O, I want to thank you so much on behalf of FIDF Live for joining us. It was eye-opening, and I really do appreciate your time. Toda rabah.
Thank you very much. My honor.
During Israel's recent war, Operation Guardian of the Walls, more than 4,000 rockets were fired at Israel from Gaza. However, what made this war different was the number of rockets fired at Israel's center, what you see behind me right now, Tel Aviv. And yet, destruction was minimal. Why? The answer is Iron Dome, a perfect example of the partnership between Israel and the United States. I'm in the middle of the country at an Iron Dome outpost. You can see the Iron Dome behind us. And I'm very excited to introduce you to Brigadier General Doron Gavish. He is the former commander of Israel's air defense. Now he's retired, but he is in the Miluim, the reserves, where he is in charge of cooperation, working with U.S. military forces to enhance Israel's air defense system. So first of all, Brigadier General, thank you so much for joining us on FIDF Live.
Thank you.
I want to ask you right away about Operation Guardian of the Walls. Iron Dome played such a critical role. And to us civilians, obviously it was important, but to you, you have a personal connection. So I want to hear your personal thoughts about Iron Dome.
When I'm talking about defending Israel, is that one of the main challenges was to fight those rockets and missiles coming from Gaza and from other directions also. So the ability with the Iron Dome is much greater, because before we were not defended against those rockets and missiles shot into Israel. But we brought this defense. So this is very, very important, and it is also part of a strategy that the Israeli Defense Forces have against the rockets and missiles, which is also part of this strategy is also the alert capabilities, and some of it are the attack capabilities. So really the Iron Dome brought with it what we needed during those times in the last 10 years. The other thing when I think about the Iron Dome is really saving lives. And this is a pure tool, we call it a tool, it's a military tool, but it's pure system that brings with it an ability to save lives.
The reality is the enemy is getting more sophisticated. How does Israel need to deal with that sophistication, specifically when it comes to Iron Dome and air defense technology?
Looking back in the last 10 years, the enemy really tried to challenge us. He tried to challenge us from day one, and we also saw it in the last escalation. And I think, like everything in the military, we usually divide it to three parts. So the first part are the operators themselves. Those are becoming more and more professional because they are gaining experience. This is the first thing. The second thing, our training is much better than it was in the past. So we are really trying to train them as the best as we can. And we are always looking what would be the next challenge that they would like to challenge us.
Right now you deal with cooperation between the U.S. and the Israeli militaries, and you've done that for a long time. I want to ask, what is the nature of that cooperation? How is it growing? And what has that experience been like over the years, the cooperation between the two militaries?
When we're talking about enhancing the defense of Israel, I can say that, from the one hand, we feel that we can defend ourselves. But then the defense with the United States, it's even greater. And when we are talking about those strategic threats coming from the East, we think that together, United States and Israel, we could defend it even better and also deter the enemies from, when they understand that it's not only us, it's also our brothers. We have this kind of saying that we say partner in peace, brother in war. So we really feel like that we are partner in peace but brothers in war, and maybe we could talk about it later, but I was there during the Gulf War when I was fighting, and next to me there was a US officer. So we really felt like brothers during a wartime.
Brigadier General, for my final question, I want to ask about the people. Iron Dome is an amazing technology. It has saved so many lives, but ultimately behind the machine, there are people. So talk to me about the people behind this amazing technology.
In order to defend the state of Israel, it is significant to say that those men and women are really saving lives together. We talked before about working shoulder to shoulder with the US forces. So here you see men and women working shoulder to shoulder in order to defend the state of Israel and really to save lives. And this is what is so important about it.
True alliances don't happen often, but when there's a meeting of the minds, a joining of the hearts, it happens. And that is the story with Israel and America. And as the landscape of war continues to evolve, with 24/7 cyber attacks, nuclear arms races, and an ever more sophisticated enemy, the soldiers of America and Israel, the true heroes on the front lines of freedom, stand more united than ever to protect our lives and our liberty. With heartfelt appreciation to them all, I'm Joel Chasnoff signing off from FIDF Live.